Throughout the time that I'm talking to you and after this talk is done, and when you find yourself in debates with people and you find yourself getting agitated, I want you to remember one very simple thing. That you have never locked eyes with another person who is not worthy of freedom, of liberty, of connection, and of belonging. I'm going to start by telling you a story of an experience that happened to me several years ago. I went to the courthouse to argue a motion. There was a partner of mine that was with me. We get to the courthouse. We have to argue the motions in chambers. One of the two opposing counsels came up and joined us, and as we were walking down, I'm stopped. A sheriff's deputy yells out to me, ma'am, you can't go back there. Ma'am, you can't go back there. And so I pause, I go towards him, and in this interaction, he essentially tells me, you can't go back there because this area is for attorneys only. And so I pause, I smile, and I tell him I'm an attorney. He doesn't believe me. You're an attorney? Let me see your bar card. I pause again, I smile. I show him my bar card. My partner who was with me was a white male, and he chose to take out his bar card and show his bar card as well. And in that moment, the atmosphere changed. Because then the sheriff's deputy began to look at me, my partner, and he realized what he'd done. There were 3 of us. He only asked for proof from 1. At that moment, opposing counsel who was with us, also a white male, began to say, you can take my word for it, we're all attorneys here. The reason I tell you that story is not because it's special, because in my professional life, I've had many experiences like that. At courthouses, with judges, with court staff, at depositions, with colleagues. There are different ways in which people can tell you you're other, you're less than, you don't belong, this table is not for you. There are all kinds of ways in which we other and marginalize people. And I could share those stories with you. What I will tell you about this particular incident is that on the day that this happened, I was flooded with anger and with a warmth that went along with embarrassment and humiliation. That as I was standing there and I paused again and smiled again and held my tongue again, choosing not to point out the inconsistency, that my inner voice was telling me, don't get too loud, use your low voice. Because if you start talking loud, they'll say you sound shrill or worse, hysterical. We've all heard that one. And so I have to navigate this stereotype of the angry black woman. And you know who she is. You've seen her on TV. She's that woman that some people see anytime a black woman has an opinion, says her mind, shows passion, or questions the status quo. Stop. See, this is the place when stories like this are shared that the blustery and sometimes contemptuous responses begin. This is when people begin to say things like, well, you don't know that this had anything to do with race. He didn't say that he stopped you because you were black. Or, what's the problem? They're supposed to check everybody who goes back there towards chambers. He had the right to check you. Or, law enforcement have a very tough job. They put their lives at risk to keep us safe. And whatever they ask you to do, you just need to do it. We hear those responses. We hear the responses where people say, here we go, again. Another person of color talking about race, again. Oh, a minority playing the race card. I hear those comments, I read those comments. We experience those comments. And what we do when we react like that to real stories of real people is we find a way to say your story does not matter. The disparate treatment that you experience doesn't matter. Discrimination doesn't matter. Your reality doesn't matter. When we do that, we refuse to give visibility to the truth and the experiences of people. And when we do that around racial injustice or oppression or any kind of bigotry or ism, what we do is we amplify the impact. And I see this. I see that we engage in these conversations that turn into shouting wars. We see it on TV. We see it in the political sphere. We see it in the comment sections of the news. My goodness, the comment sections. That's where good hearts go to die a slow death from the shame trolls. But that's what we've come to in how we engage in difficult discussions. We don't engage. We shout at one another. And I'll give a mild example. One that I sometimes face when I'm trying to convince people of structural and systemic problems that we have to address. And I'm talking about people who are educated, people who are aware, and people who are good-hearted and want to do good things. And it may be something as simple as, we have some issues that we really need to talk about because our professionals of color are facing some obstacles in the organization, and our Black professionals are the ones facing it the worst. And we need to address these issues because part of what's going on is that our leadership doesn't really relate to these issues because they're mostly white and they enjoy a white privilege. White privilege. I hate that word. Why do people always have to talk about white privilege? I don't have privilege. I grew up poor. I understand you grew up poor, but when we're talking about white privilege, we're not talking about poverty. We're talking about benefits that you may receive that you have not earned. And you receive them because of your race, and it's something that other people don't have. I earned everything that I have. I worked hard to get here. I understand, you worked hard, but so did I, and so did so many other professionals of color. But it's not an issue of working hard. It's an issue of biases that exist in the organization and barriers. What barriers? I don't believe that. I believe that if you work hard and you follow the rules and you do what needs to be done, you can succeed in this organization. Oh, okay. So you weren't at the implicit bias training session that we did? You know that's not true. You know that there are things that people face that are different. No, I don't, Kori. I don't agree with that. Everybody has their struggles. Everybody has stuff that they go through. But this is not an issue that continues to exist. We've had civil rights laws in this country for years, and I get so sick of people continuing to talk about racism as if it's still here. Okay, I know that we've had civil rights laws on the books, but that does not mean the realities of people have changed that much. You know what, Kori? If there isn't even an issue with race, I believe it's reverse racism. I believe that as a white person, I'm the one who's at a disadvantage. Because the truth is, everybody's talking about all this diversity stuff, and all that means is opportunities that people should have to work for are being given to people who haven't earned it. And in my perspective, in my opinion, it's a sad day in America to be a white man. Whoa, reverse racism? A sad day in America to be a white man. Do you know what it feels like to go to the store and have somebody follow you around like you're a thief? You know what that feels like? You know what it feels like to be going to go pick up your kids from preschool and get pulled over for driving while black and have the police officers pull up on both sides of your vehicle with their hand on their weapon? Do you know what that feels like? Dude, do you know what it feels like to drop your kids off at school and wonder what kind of disparate discipline they'll face? I bet you have no clue what that's about while you're standing here talking to me about a sad day to be a white man in America. I have friends who sit up at night wondering about their kids coming home safe. That's not something that you have to deal with. And let me tell you something. You don't know what it feels like to be walking back to your dorm room with your friends, and as you're walking back, a group of men across the street who are apparently drunk and half-dressed are yelling across at you, "Nigger, bitch, this is the trash that this college has brought to our town." You don't know what that feels like. You don't know what it feels like to be flooded with anger and to want to say something, but know that you can't. Because if you do, things may escalate and you don't feel safe. And to share that experience with people that you love and have them tell you, it's not a big deal. This is a safe town. Nothing would have happened. You don't know what that feels like. So don't stand here telling me that it's a sad day to be a white man in America. You see what I did? That's what we do. I say to the person who's talking about their discomfort that your experience doesn't matter because I have one that's bigger and more powerful. And when we do that, we marginalize one another. And I see us doing this in our country and in the world on everything. We stand today behind a national backdrop where we point fingers and use harsh rhetoric against people because of where they were born, because of their religion, because of their gender identity, their gender expression, their sexual orientation, and how their families are constructed. We do this and we're tearing ourselves apart. And so the question that I have for us today is, what does it look like if we do things completely differently? What if there's another way? And the question that I start by asking myself is, what does it look like to make space for all our experiences? To make space for my truth and your truth, to make space for my anger and your grief, your guilt, my defensiveness, my fear of the future, and your hope for the future. What does it look like for us to make space for those things to sit side by side? And in order for us to do that, in order for us to embrace that, I believe that we have to join in being courageous, having courageous conversations and walking in courage. And to do that, there are 5 things I believe we must embrace. First, we must listen. And we must listen very differently than we have up until now. We have to learn to listen, to understand what is being said, and to hear from here beyond what we hear from here. We have to listen in ways that we are empathetic. And we cannot be empathetic when we're busy telling people how to feel about their life. There are times that listening means we must be silent. Silent because you don't have anything to say that adds to the conversation. Silence because if you open your mouth, you're going to make it about you, and it's not about you. We have to listen in ways that are judgment-free. Too many times we're busy telling people how they should feel, how they should protest, how they should speak up, how they should be activists, and we don't get to tell people about their reality. Not too long ago, I was sharing a conversation with someone, and he tried to tell me about me, and I had to say, dude, I've been a black woman for a long time. You don't get to tell me about my experience. Second, we have to cultivate curiosity. So what does that look like to put on a mindset of learning? What does that look like to say, I want to know about the experiences that go beyond my lived experiences? What does it look like for me to look at the world through the lenses that other people share? What does it look like to hear something that bothers me and to instead say, where is that coming from for you? Why do you think that? When you think about that experience and what happened with you, how did that make you feel? What do you want from me? Or best, I'm listening. Cultivate curiosity. Seek a cultural mentor. Find somebody who can take you to the places that you haven't been before. Somebody that you can ask questions. Somebody who is willing to share with you the things that you don't know. We're going to need it on this journey because none of us knows it all. Third, we must negotiate our relationship with vulnerability. There's nothing about this experience that is fun. There's nothing about this experience that's comfortable and easy, even for those of us who do it all the time. You will get angry, you will get frustrated, you will want to call names, and sometimes we will slip up when we're not mindful and we won't be very gracious. But we're called to be gracious in this process. And we're called to do the thing that's not comfortable. And so for me, it may be standing up here as a black woman and telling you things that actually happened to me, and it doesn't feel good because I'm opening up myself to being ridiculed, to being judged, to being criticized. And no one wants that. It's why the conversations that we Black people have when we're with each other is very different than the conversations we have when we're in mixed company, because we've been told you're playing the race card, pff, that's not real, and all sorts of things. And on the other end, the vulnerability may be you don't want to ask a question and have somebody call you racist, or have someone say to you, Google is your friend, look it up. Or someone say to you, that's my emotional labor. I'm really glad that you finally come to the party, but we've been dealing with this for a long time, so you need to go figure that out. But we have to sit in that space of vulnerability and say to ourselves, no matter how messy it gets, no matter how painful it gets, that we will do it and we will do it again. And what that means is that we're going to be called sometimes to speak up, to stand up, and to do something. Because when we decide to build community with each other, when we decide to create belonging, what that means is that when something is happening to me, you speak. And when something is happening to you, we speak. And when somebody is saying something about your transgender daughter, that I speak. Because we belong to each other. And so it may be something as simple as taking out your bar card and interrupting the moment. Or it may require more from you. It may require you to give up your card of being the easygoing person at the Thanksgiving table when you have to say something to Uncle Bob. But we can do it, and it has to be done. Because silence in the face of tragedy and oppression is deafening, and we can't afford not to speak for each other. Which brings me to belonging, the fifth thing. We must begin to reinterpret how we define belonging. We live in these silos, isolated from one another, detached from the experiences from one another. But what does it mean to be American? What does it mean to believe in liberty, to believe in freedom, to believe in justice? What are those things for us? That's where we need to sit, to connect across our shared values, to say, how do I build a circle of belonging that encompasses humanity in a different way, that transcends differences, that transcends diversity, that transcends race? Because until we are able to do those things, we will not be able to tackle the problem of racism. Now, the truth is, I've told you some stories, and many of us in this room would probably never use the N word or B word, and we've cleaned it up, sanitized it as if that's how people talk. Except when somebody wants to strip you and degrade you, they do use the real words. And the challenge is that Charlottesville and Charleston is not how everyday racism shows up. It dresses up or wears high heels, and we normalize it. So I don't know about you, I find myself exhausted and wanting something new. And so I leave with you this definition of courage, an invitation to courageous being, that courage is doing the thing that you don't want to do, the thing that's icky, but it needs to be done. I invite you to do the thing that you don't want to do, but that needs to be done. Because it is in doing those things, small, repeating over and over, that we become courageous. Courage is a practice. But if we're going to create a new way of belonging and being in community, we must be courageous, and that's my invitation to you. And so as I walk off the stage, please remember that as we build belonging and community, locked eyes with a person who is not deserving of freedom, liberty, connection, and belonging. Thank you.